So welcome everyone to English Not Permitted, the only channel on YouTube focusing entirely on foreign language film and TV shows. So today I'm talking about the film Uncle Boonmee, Who Can Recall His Past Lives. Now this is a weird and wonderful film coming from Thailand. Luckily for me, I live in Thailand, so I'm going to celebrate this video with a good old Sang Som soda. That's something. Now I'm going to split this video into two parts. Part one, I'm going to keep about as spoiler-free as possible because I do think this film deserves to be seen with fresh eyes without knowing too much about it. Because to me, this is the type of film that it might be better to not know anything about before watching, and that way it might just completely blow you away. And this kind of reminds me of the way when I first started watching foreign films on a channel called Film 4 in England. Usually they put a film on, I'd never heard of it before, and I'd just sit there and watch it and be blown away. This could be a great film to do that with. But anyway, my short answer is yes, I recommend this film. However, there are some people that might not enjoy all aspects of this film, and I'll get to that in a little bit. So this film is directed by the director Apichatpong Weerasethakul, who before making this film had spent most of his career in Thailand. He's now being given bigger opportunities, partially because of this film, abroad, and he's branching out and doing more English language stuff. In fact, he had a film out last year called Memoria with Tilda Swinton as the main actress. So at its core, this film is about a terminally ill man who lives in the Thai countryside called Boonmee. At the start of the film, we see that he's really ill and he's worried about dying. Perhaps though doesn't know how soon he is going to die. And he's taken care of by a nurse from Laos called Jai. So early on in the film, in the evening, when all the family members are having dinner, the spirit of Boonmee's long-dead wife appears at the dinner table. And this film is all about how Boonmee interacts with the ghost of his wife and the spirits that live in the jungle. And quite frankly, that's about all of the plot I want to give away in the spoiler-free section. I can, however, give some more detail to some of the parts of the film that I really liked and some of the background of how the film was made without spoiling it too much. Later in the video, I'm going to dive into some specific scenes and discuss what I think they mean. So despite what I've just mentioned, this film isn't a horror film, although it has some really kind of creepy aspects to it, and that's one of the major aspects that I loved. You can see from some of these effects here that this isn't a high budget film. In fact, it's quite a low budget. However, I think that adds to the mystique of the film. If you look at some of these shots of these spirits, it's creepy as hell, even though that isn't the purpose of the film. It's not a film designed to scare you. To me, this film was more about the ideas of life and death in Buddhist culture. And I think the ideas of reincarnation and the ideas in the film about how the ghosts interact with the living was a completely unique take on the afterlife in cinema. I feel like for the most part in Western cinema, there's two main ideas of what happens to you when you die, and it might be in the form of a ghost or maybe in the Christian ideologies of heaven and hell. And we see very little in between. In this film, you're going to see some more ideas from Buddhist culture, especially the idea of animalistic reincarnation. And I actually saw an interview with the director Apichatpong, and he said that he was inspired by Western-style sci-fi films when he was younger, but also obsessed with the local Thai folklore. So this film is his attempt to combine the two ideas in one. Another thing I loved about this film was the setting of rural Thailand. There's not a lot of films that come out of Thailand, and there's especially not many films that come out with a lot of hype. But even those that do, they're generally set in Bangkok, and they might have a bigger budget or a bigger set. This is very clearly set in rural Thailand. I spent a little bit of time in rural Thailand doing some hiking, and this is really what it looks like. It's really mountainous, really jungly. The people live in these wooden houses, and the director even used some local teenagers as the actors rather than trained actors. And this is one of the reasons I started this YouTube channel, because in films like this, we get to see people, places, and ideas that would never reach us otherwise. The film is actually set in Apichatpong's hometown of Khon Kaen in northeastern Thailand, right on the border with Laos, and that might be why he makes a couple of jokes at the expense of some of the Lao people. Okay, now I want to talk about some things that I personally loved about this film, but other people might not love quite so much. One thing that I loved is that it's open to interpretation, and I don't think there is a clear answer to what is happening in each section of the film. Some of it's weird, some of it's trippy. It's this really dreamlike film, which reminded me a lot of the David Fincher film, Mulholland Drive. And it's just not a straightforward film with a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's not going to be an explainer video from anyone who's seen this film saying, these are the things you missed. This is what really happened in the film. It is open to interpretation. And personally, I think there should be more films like that. The director even went as far to say in one of his interviews when he was touring this film that you don't need to understand everything, in order to be able to enjoy it. As someone watching the film, I like to try and figure out what the director was thinking or what really is happening. But if you need to know exactly what's happening and the meaning behind everything, this film might drive you a little bit crazy. It's also non-linear in the sense that there's stories within stories, some of which do seem out of place, and it never quite circles back to it. And finally, part of his filmmaking style is that he uses these really long, wide-angle shots with little to no dialogue in them. Now, I recently reviewed the film In the Mood for Love, which I criticized the film for overuse of these kind of long shots. However, in this film, I really liked it. I think it adds to the mystique. You're always watching things from far away, and it almost feels like you're one of the spirits of the jungle because you're constantly watching from behind the trees, from the distance. However, I can understand if some people think, what's going on here? Why is this shot so long? And why is there no dialogue in it? Okay, at this point of the video, I'm going to start analyzing more specific details of the film, and this could be considered spoilers. So to start with, let's talk about his son-in-law and the monkey spirits. Personally, I can't think of a more creative representation of the afterlife than the monkey spirits that his son-in-law inhabits. I really liked his story where he was led off by the monkey spirits and eventually he became one of them. This is what I was talking about before in the non-spoilery part of the video, where I was talking about creative representations of the afterlife. Usually we just get a ghost. However, this monkey spirit, one, is creepy as hell. Two, is nothing like I've ever seen in cinema before. So it seems to me that the purpose of the wife's spirit and the son's monkey spirit is to guide Boonmee to his death. And it seems to me that they enlist the help of the nephew and the sister-in-law in order to lead him to the afterlife. To me, the cave may or may not have been a real place. To me, it could have been a metaphor for death, and the scenes where we see the family guide him towards the cave isn't actually them killing him or murdering him. It's a representation of them looking after him until his death and making sure he dies safely and comfortable. So I think the strangest part of this film is undoubtedly the sex scene with the catfish. Now, like I said, this is all open to interpretation, and I actually did look for what the director's interpretation of this scene was, and he doesn't seem to have spoken about it in detail. I think he prefers to let the audience guess. My idea was this is Uncle Boonmee's past life. He was the princess, and I say this because it was from her point of view we see her touch the servant's head. And one thing I think links every scene in the film is there is some link to spirituality or spirit. This may just be one part of his past lives where he did have interactions with some of the spirits. And that spirit would be the sexy catfish. Now, this scene did seem a little bit out of place to me. However, I think it just goes to show the director's willingness to do anything and really experiment and make scenes weird, make a weird dreamlike film. One part of the film that did confuse me a little bit was the references to the wars against the communists. Now, to my knowledge, previously, Thailand hadn't been engaged in a large-scale war against communists. However, I did a bit of research about this, specifically in the Konkan region of Thailand. There was a communist uprising, and a violent communist uprising. However, this uprising was quashed by the local leaders, but atrocities were committed. And I saw in an interview Apichatpong, he references this, that he grew up after this, and you kind of hear through storytelling itself what happened in these wars. So he wanted to include part of his own personal upbringing into the film as well. Now, the end of the film I think is really interesting, and I think it's one of the most difficult parts to interpret. I've been thinking about this all day, and I'm still not really sure what's going on. I took it to mean something about observing two different paths you can go down, because we see the character who plays the nephew, who then becomes a monk. We see him observing him and his family from a distance, and we see him split off. One of them stays in the apartment, one of them goes to a bar. At first, I thought this might mean that they died too. However, I don't really think that's the case. I think that is kind of an observation that there's two different paths you can go down in life, depending on what kind of decisions you make. That's just me spitballing here. I'd love to know what other people thought of the ending of the film. So I'm going to about end this review and discussion of the film here. To me, this is one of the most creative films I've seen in a while. I absolutely loved it. I loved the dreaminess to it. I loved the eerie soundtrack. I loved the low budget spirit monkeys. And I just absolutely loved all the ideas of life and death discussed in the film. I'm most definitely going to check out some of Apichatpong's other work. I've been watching trailers of it already, and it seems like he's got a bit of a style like this. He makes these really dreamy, weird films, and I'm very much looking forward to watching more of them in the future. If you've enjoyed this review and this video, this channel is all about foreign language film and TV shows, so if that's your kind of thing, please like my video and subscribe my channel. I'm Jack Taylor. Thank you very much for watching. Sawadee khap. Goodbye.